When I thought I was dying, clutching my head in unbearable pain, my only son and his wife dismissed me with a cold, "Don't call again," because they were on vacation. They thought I'd simply disappear, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled, realizing it was my turn to live. And when they return, they'll discover their lives have changed forever. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from to hear how I turned my abandonment into my liberation. Martha resolves that Daniel and Sarah will be very surprised upon their return. The digital glow of the alarm clock read 3:47 a.m., a harsh, unwelcome beacon in the oppressive darkness of Martha's bedroom. But it wasn't the light that jolted her awake. It was the thunderous explosion inside her skull, a blinding pain that felt less like a headache and more like her very brain was trying to claw its way out. Martha, a woman of 66 years who had weathered countless storms, knew this was different. This was a pain that whispered of mortality, a cold dread that clung to her like a shroud. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the encroaching silence, and a primal fear, one she hadn't felt since her own mother's final days, gripped her. "I'm dying," she thought, the words echoing in her mind with terrifying clarity. Her hand trembled as she fumbled for her phone on the nightstand, her fingers stiff and uncooperative. There was only one number she truly needed, one person who should always be there. Her son, Daniel, her only child, the boy she had raised with every ounce of her being, sacrificed for, and loved unconditionally. She pressed his contact, the screen a dizzying blur. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times, each chime a hammer blow to her throbbing head. Then, the inevitable, cheerful voice of his voicemail, asking her to leave a message. She hung up, a whimper escaping her lips, and tried again, her hope dwindling with each unanswered ring. Still voicemail. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through the fog of pain. Daniel might not answer, but Sarah, his wife, was meticulous about her phone. Martha, desperate, dialed her daughter-in-law's number. It rang once, then a sharp click. "Hello?" Sarah's voice, sharp with irritation, cut through the quiet. It wasn't the warm, concerned tone Martha desperately needed. "Sarah?" "Oh, thank goodness," Martha gasped, her voice thin and reedy. The pain was making it hard to form coherent sentences. "It's me, Martha. I don't know what's happening. My head, I think I need an ambulance." She tried to convey the urgency, the sheer terror gripping her. "Is Daniel there? Can you tell him?" There was a pause, a rustle on the other end, then a muffled conversation Martha couldn't quite decipher. She heard Daniel's name, then Sarah's hushed, annoyed tones. The silence that followed felt impossibly long, stretching taut, vibrating with Martha's desperate need. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was startlingly clear, devoid of warmth, edged with an almost clinical annoyance. "Martha," Sarah began, her tone chillingly flat. "We're on a family vacation, Daniel and I. We're in Barbados, enjoying some much-needed time away." There was a pause, a calculated breath, and then the words that would forever etch themselves into Martha's memory, spoken with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "Please don't call again unless someone is literally dying. We need this break." And then, with a curt click, the line went dead. Martha stared at the darkened screen, the cold plastic of the phone still pressed to her ear. The silence in the room was deafening, amplified by the ringing in her ears, a phantom echo of Sarah's dismissal. Heartbroken didn't begin to cover it. She felt a profound emptiness, a void where hope and connection should have been. Her son, her only son, and his wife, had abandoned her in what felt like her final moments. The world began to tilt, the headache roaring back with renewed vengeance, consuming her. She knew she couldn't wait. With a final surge of adrenaline, Martha somehow managed to dial 911, her fingers fumbling, her vision blurring. She mumbled her address, incoherent words about her head, about being alone. Before she could finish, a dizzying wave swept over her, and she felt the familiar floor rush up to meet her. The last thing she remembered was the distant wail of sirens, growing closer, then absolute blackness. She drifted back to consciousness in a haze of fluorescent lights and hushed voices. The scent of antiseptic filled her nostrils, stark and sterile. She was in a hospital. An ER, by the looks of it. A kind face, a young doctor with weary eyes, leaned over her. "Miss Peterson, you're in the emergency room. You had a fall. We're running some tests." When asked for an emergency contact, Martha, with a residual flicker of habit and hope, weakly supplied Daniel's number. Surely, now, they would answer. Surely, the hospital calling would make them understand the gravity of her situation. Later that morning, Dr. Hayes, a woman with compassionate but serious eyes, sat by Martha's bedside. "Miss Peterson, your tests came back clear of anything catastrophic, like a stroke, which is good news." Martha felt a faint wave of relief, quickly replaced by a fresh surge of dread. "However, you suffered from a severe tension headache, likely brought on by extreme stress, and your blood pressure was dangerously high. We've managed to stabilize it, but we need to monitor you closely." Martha nodded, the words barely registering over the hum of the machines and the dull ache in her head. "My son, Daniel," she whispered, her voice still weak. Did you reach him?" Dr. Hayes's expression softened, a hint of professional sympathy in her eyes. "We tried the number you gave us, Miss Peterson. Multiple times, in fact. Unfortunately, we were unable to get through. It went straight to voicemail each time." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Not only had they dismissed her, but they hadn't even bothered to check their messages. A stark realization, cold and brutal, settled over Martha. She wasn't just alone in her apartment in the dead of night. She was completely alone in the world. Her family, the people she had devoted her life to, were unreachable, unwilling to be reached. Later, a kind-faced nurse with warm eyes and a gentle touch introduced herself as Isabella, came to check on her. Isabella adjusted the IV drip and smoothed Martha's covers. "I'm sorry your family couldn't make it in, Miss Peterson," she said softly, her voice laced with genuine empathy. "We know it can be tough to be here alone." Martha merely offered a tight, polite smile. But inside, a terrible clarity was blooming, pushing through the remnants of pain and heartbreak. Her family didn't need her. Not for her comfort, not for her support, and certainly not for her crises. She was merely convenient, a safety net they expected to be there, but never wanted to truly engage with. She existed to provide, not to be cared for. This realization, instead of shattering her completely, brought with it a strange, almost exhilarating sense of purpose. For decades, Martha had lived her life for others, for her husband, for Daniel's family. Every decision, every action, had been filtered through the lens of their needs, their expectations, their approval. But as she lay there, utterly abandoned yet strangely calm, she understood. The slate had been wiped clean. There was no one left to please, no one left to live for but herself. A quiet resolve settled deep within her. It was time. Time to stop chasing ghosts of affection, time to stop begging for crumbs of attention. It was time to start thinking about what she wanted. The thought was liberating, terrifying, and utterly brilliant all at once. Martha closed her eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. Daniel and Sarah were going to be very, very surprised upon their return. Daniel becomes increasingly distant. Their relationship turns transactional. As the last lingering traces of the hospital's sedative faded, leaving only a dull throb in her head, Martha lay in her sterile bed, the quiet hum of the machines a lullaby to her awakening mind. The starkness of her abandonment had ripped open a dam of memories, a lifetime of moments flashing before her eyes, revealing a pattern she had been too eager, too loving, to see. It was a pattern that had slowly, insidiously, transformed her from a beloved mother and grandmother into what felt like a walking, talking family ATM. 8 years ago, when Daniel, her handsome, intelligent son, then 32, had brought Sarah home, Martha had been overjoyed. A vibrant, ambitious young woman, Sarah seemed like the perfect partner for Daniel. Martha had envisioned a warm, expansive future, filled with shared family dinners, holidays, and the joyous chaos of grandchildren. She had vowed to be the supportive, non-interfering mother-in-law she wished she had had, a source of unwavering love and generosity. Sarah, with her bright smiles and carefully chosen words, had been masterful. She never directly asked, not at first. Instead, she would paint vivid pictures of dreams just slightly out of reach. A beautiful, spacious home where Lily, their future daughter, could have a proper yard. Daniel's ambition to start his own consulting firm, if only they had the capital for a sleek office. The perfect, idyllic family vacation they simply couldn't afford. Each story, each wistful sigh, was a subtle prod, a silent invitation, and Martha, ever eager to help, ever wanting to see her son happy, had responded with check after check. The first significant sum was for the down payment on their first house. A charming, 3-bedroom home in a desirable suburb. It was everything Daniel and Sarah had dreamed of. The bank, however, required a larger down payment than they could manage. Martha, without a second thought, had offered $20,000. "It's a loan, Mom. Of course we'll pay you back," Daniel had insisted, kissing her cheek. Martha had smiled, waved it off. "Don't worry about it, honey. Just be happy." The words had been genuine then, a testament to her boundless affection. That loan, like so many others, was never repaid. Then came Lily, a tiny bundle of pink and hope, filling Martha's world with an unprecedented joy. Martha, retired and with time on her hands, had volunteered, eagerly, to help with childcare, 3 times a week. She loved those days. The sticky fingers, the babbling laughter, the profound connection with her granddaughter. Sarah, always impeccably dressed even with a newborn, would drop Lily off, often with a quick, almost practiced air kiss, and then, with an equally quick explanation of an important meeting, or a yoga class, or a spa appointment she absolutely couldn't miss, she would disappear, leaving Martha with Lily for the entire day. Martha treasured every moment. She was there for Lily's first wobbly steps, an explosion of pure delight as the little girl, all smiles and determination, stumbled forward into her waiting arms. Martha's heart had swelled, tears pricking her eyes. She couldn't wait to tell Daniel and Sarah. Later that evening, when she recounted the magical moment, Sarah had merely offered a cool, dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, she's been practically walking for weeks at home. You just caught her on a good day." Her. Martha remembered feeling a flicker of something then, a tiny pinprick of unease, but she quickly dismissed it. Sarah was a new mother, perhaps a little protective of her own experiences, a little stressed. It was understandable. Martha simply smiled, holding Lily closer, the warmth of the child a balm against the fleeting sting of Sarah's words. 2 years later, Noah arrived, a boisterous, charming boy who completed their family. And the pattern intensified, deepened. Martha now watched both children 3 days a week, often for full 10-hour days, and most Saturday nights. Her home became their second home, filled with their toys, their laughter, their occasional tantrums. Daniel and Sarah's finances, despite both working full-time, seemed perpetually tight. Martha found herself not just providing childcare, but also quietly funding clothes, toys, swimming lessons, gymnastics classes, anything the children needed or desired. She never kept track, never tallied the cost. Their happiness was her reward. The children adored Grandma Martha. They would run to her, their small arms wrapping around her legs, their faces alight with unreserved affection. It was the purest joy she knew. But Martha also noticed Sarah's subtle redirection of their affection. A gentle pull away from Martha's embrace when she arrived to pick them up, a quick reminder to give Mommy a big hug, a pointed emphasis on Mommy and Daddy's house. When the children spoke of spending time with Martha, the visual cues were even more telling. At Daniel and Sarah's beautifully decorated house, the mantelpiece and walls were adorned with family photos. There were countless images of Sarah's parents, beaming with the children, at holidays, on vacations. Martha, however, was conspicuously absent. She might be in the corner of one or two, a blurry figure in the background, but never front and center, never acknowledged as an integral part of their family narrative. The turning point, the moment the unspoken became brutally explicit, came one afternoon after Martha had spent the entire day building an elaborate fort with Lily and Noah. Sarah had arrived, looking crisp and tired. She'd watched the children squeal with delight as they showed Martha a new drawing. Then, with a sigh, she'd pulled Martha aside, her voice low and firm. "Martha," she'd begun, her eyes hard. "We need to talk. The kids are getting too attached to you." Martha's heart had lurched. "Too attached?" she'd echoed, confused. "Yes," Sarah had continued, her voice gaining an edge. "It's not healthy for them to prefer their grandmother over their parents. They're starting to see you as the primary caregiver, and that's just not acceptable." Martha had been stunned into silence. Accused. Accused of loving her grandchildren too much. Of being too present. Too much herself. The words had been a slap, leaving her reeling, feeling like an intruder in her own son's family. She had felt a hot flush of shame, a deep, aching sense of injustice, but she hadn't been able to utter a single word in her defense. From that day forward, the invisible rules became visible, rigid, and strictly enforced. All activities with the children had to be pre-approved. Martha was told to check with Sarah before buying anything for the children over $10. Even family traditions, like Martha's annual Christmas cookie baking with the children, had to be cleared beforehand. Her role was being systematically diminished, controlled, sanitized, and Daniel? He became increasingly distant. Their conversations, once easy and full of shared warmth, devolved into quick transactional exchanges. "Mom, can you watch the kids on Tuesday?" Or, "Mom, we need some help with Lily's tuition next month." His eyes, which once held such affection, now often seemed to hold a fleeting, uncomfortable guilt, quickly masked. He was present, physically, but his spirit had withdrawn, leaving Martha feeling colder, emptier than ever. The realization, lying in that hospital bed, was that the abandonment she felt today wasn't new. It was merely the culmination of years of slow, painful withdrawal. Anger, cold and purposeful, grows within her. She begins to plan her escape. The hospital bed, though softened by new sheets, felt like a cold, hard slab beneath Martha. The memories continued their relentless assault, each one a fresh wound. She thought of last Christmas, a memory so raw it still made her ache. For weeks, she had meticulously planned a magical day for Lily and Noah. She had spent hours crafting personalized, homemade stockings, each stitched with care and filled with small, thoughtful treasures. She'd mapped out an elaborate treasure hunt that would lead them through her small, cozy home, culminating in their favorite breakfast spread, fluffy pancakes with fresh berries and crispy bacon. She'd even bought a small, real Christmas tree, decorating it with ornaments they had made together over the years, wanting to create a sense of wonder, a tradition of their own. Christmas Eve had passed in a silent blur. No calls. No last-minute "Merry Christmas, Mom." Martha had gone to bed with a knot in her stomach, telling herself they were probably busy with last-minute preparations, focusing on the children. Christmas morning dawned, bright and cold, but Martha's home remained quiet, empty. She had waited, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands, her gaze fixed on the silent phone. Noon arrived, then 1 o'clock. The pancakes sat, uneaten, the treasure hunt clues still hidden. Finally, her resolve crumbled, and she called Daniel's number. Sarah answered, her voice bright, breezy, utterly devoid of any hint of regret or apology. "Oh, Martha, Merry Christmas. We were just opening gifts." There was a pause, a small, knowing laugh from Sarah. "We decided to have Christmas morning just as our immediate family this year. You understand, right? It's important for the kids to have those memories, just us." The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Martha understood. All right. She understood she was not considered immediate family when it came to their most sacred traditions. She understood she was an afterthought, easily excised. The carefully planned treasure hunt, the lovingly made stockings, the small, sparkling tree, all of it had been for nothing. Martha had spent Christmas Day alone, the silence of her home amplifying the hollowness in her chest. That day, for the first time in a very long time, she had cried. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body, tears for a loneliness she had never imagined she would feel. Yet, even after that profound heartbreak, the pattern of giving continued. She had tried to rationalize it, to tell herself she might have been too pushy, too eager, too much. And so, when the requests continued, a loan for Sarah's spa weekend with her friends, a sudden need for Lily and Noah's preschool tuition, the down payment for their shiny new SUV, Martha, with a sigh that grew heavier each time, said yes. She pushed down the burgeoning feeling of being used, of being taken for granted, burying it under layers of rationalization and the desperate hope that one day they would see her, truly see her, for all she gave. 3 months before her collapse, the family dynamics had taken an even more painful turn. Sarah's mother, Brenda, had come to visit from Arizona, a woman whose every word dripped with passive-aggressive superiority. Martha, ever the hopeful peacemaker, had invited everyone for Sunday dinner, preparing her famous pot roast, a dish that usually brought smiles and second helpings. Daniel, Sarah, Lily, Noah, and Brenda arrived an hour late, without so much as a phone call or an apology. Brenda, with a dismissive glance around Martha's modest, well-loved home, promptly launched into critiques. The curtains were dated, the garden needed tending. The pot roast, while edible, wasn't quite as tender as hers. During dinner, Brenda embarked on a lengthy monologue about her other grandchildren, Sarah's sister's children, implying they were far more advanced, more engaged, due to her real involvement in their lives. She spoke of her daily video calls, her contributions to their elite private schooling, her constant presence. Daniel sat silently, picking at his food, his face carefully blank. Sarah, however, smiled, occasionally nodding and adding a prompt that encouraged her mother's cruel comparisons. Then came the photo album, a glossy testament to Brenda's curated family life. Professional portraits of grinning children, lavish family gatherings with dozens of people Martha didn't know, exotic family vacations, all featuring Brenda prominently, usually front and center, radiating matriarchal pride. Lily, sweet and innocent, had pointed to a photo of herself and Noah on a beach, surrounded by Sarah's side of the family. "Grandma Martha," she'd asked, her small voice cutting through the smug chatter. "Why don't you come on vacations with us?" The question had been like a needle, pricking Martha's heart. She had looked at Sarah, hoping for a kind word, an explanation that didn't wound. Instead, Sarah had leaned in, a saccharine smile on her face, and sweetly replied, "Grandma Martha has her own life to live, sweetie. She doesn't want to be bothered with family trips. She prefers her quiet time at home." Martha had wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth, that she yearned for those trips, for the simple inclusion, for a shared family memory that wasn't paid for by her. But she hadn't. She had sat there, a forced smile plastered on her face, pretending the lie didn't cut her to pieces, pretending the injustice wasn't a burning coal in her stomach. She had swallowed it all, as she always did, until it felt like it would choke her. Lying in that hospital bed, the memory replayed itself, vivid and agonizing. It was then that the pattern, so long ignored, so long excused, finally crystallized. She wasn't family to them, not in the true, emotional sense. She was staff, an unpaid nanny, a personal banker, a convenient resource to be used and dismissed at their leisure. Her phone remained silent, a stark reminder that their Barbadian family vacation was infinitely more important than her well-being, perhaps even her life. The heartbreak that had once dominated her emotions began to curdle, hardening into something cold and purposeful. Anger, not the hot, explosive kind, but a quiet, steady flame, began to grow within her. It was an anger born of betrayal and profound disrespect. They thought they had left her to languish, to quietly fade away. But they were wrong. As the hospital discharged her, Martha felt a stealing resolve. She was not fading away. She was planning her escape, her liberation, and they wouldn't see it coming. Martha feels a joy she hasn't felt in months. The hospital room's dim nightlight cast long shadows, but Martha's mind was anything but dim. She spent a second sleepless night in the sterile confines, her thoughts a whirlwind, each memory of betrayal fueling a growing fire of resolve. The Christmas loneliness, the pot roast humiliation, Sarah's cold dismissal. They swirled and coalesced, forming an undeniable, painful truth. Around 2 a.m., Nurse Isabella, quiet and efficient, found Martha hunched over a notepad, writing furiously in the glow of her phone's flashlight. Martha looked up, her eyes wide and intense. "Isabella," she began, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "I have a question for you. If you gave and gave to people who only took and never gave anything back, never even asked how you were, what would you call that relationship?" Isabella paused, her brow furrowed in thought. She pulled up a chair, sitting beside Martha's bed. "Well, Miss Peterson," she said, her voice gentle. The question hit Martha with the force of a physical blow. Who showed up for her? Not Daniel, not Sarah, not the family she had poured her entire being into. Instead, it was Isabella, a kind nurse, and Dr. Hayes, a compassionate stranger. It was the paramedics who found her collapsed on the floor, the anonymous hospital staff who cared for her. Strangers. They had shown more care, more human decency, than her own flesh and blood. In that moment, Martha realized with devastating clarity that she had been confusing obligation with love, her desperate desire to be needed with genuine affection. She had been clinging to a one-sided connection, deluding herself into believing it was mutual. Armed with this newfound, painful insight, Martha continued to write. She started 3 lists. The first, titled "What I've Given," quickly spread across 3 full pages. It detailed years of financial assistance, down payments, tuition, vacations, countless smaller expenses. It chronicled thousands of hours of childcare, holidays spent alone, emotional support offered without expectation, and advice always given, rarely taken. It was a staggering inventory of her life's devotion. The second list, "What I've Received," was embarrassingly, painfully short. A few perfunctory Mother's Day cards, a handful of rushed birthday lunches, a sense of being needed, but not truly valued. It was a stark, almost comical contrast to the first list, a testament to the imbalance that had defined her relationships. The third list was the hardest to start, to even conceive. What I want for the rest of my life. For so long, her wants had been subsumed by the wants of others. What did she want? The question felt foreign, alien. But slowly, tentatively, images began to surface from the forgotten corners of her soul. She wanted to travel. Really travel. To see the rolling vineyards of Tuscany, to marvel at the ancient ruins of Rome, to taste authentic Italian food. She wanted to take art classes, to learn to paint the vibrant landscapes she'd only seen in books. She wanted friends, real friends, who valued her for who she was, not for what she could provide. She wanted laughter, genuine connection, and peace. She wanted to reclaim the joy she hadn't realized she had lost. By the time the first rays of dawn filtered through the hospital window, Martha had a powerful, quiet plan. It wasn't about revenge in the petty sense, but about reclaiming her life, her resources, her very identity. It was about building a future for herself, independent of the very people who had cast her aside. A few hours later, Dr. Hayes entered Martha's room for her morning rounds, expecting to find her patient still groggy. Instead, she found Martha fully dressed in her street clothes, sitting upright in the chair, alert and strangely radiant. "Good morning, Dr. Hayes," Martha said, her voice clear and steady. Dr. Hayes smiled, sensing a shift in her patient. "Of course, Miss Peterson. How much time do I have?" Martha asked, her gaze unwavering. Dr. Hayes considered her words carefully. "Well, medically speaking, Miss Peterson, if you manage your blood pressure and stress levels, you could easily have another 20, 30 good years ahead of you, a vibrant, healthy life." She paused, looking at Martha intently. "Are you planning on making some changes?" Martha met her gaze, a faint, determined smile gracing her lips. "Oh, Dr. Hayes," she said, her voice imbued with a newfound strength. I'm making all the changes. Doctor, Hayes nodded, a knowing glint in her eyes. Good. Then my advice to you is this. Stop apologizing for wanting your own happiness. Begin living like your life matters. Because it absolutely does. Martha absorbed the words, a quiet affirmation blooming in her chest. Her first step was practical. Before leaving the hospital, she asked to speak with a patient advocate, not about her medical care, but about legal and financial restructuring. She needed guidance, a clear path to disentangle herself from the web of obligations and expectations. As soon as she was home, the silence of her apartment, which had once felt oppressive, now felt like a canvas for her new life. She immediately picked up her phone, not to call Daniel or Sarah, but to dial a number she hadn't called in months. Her neighbor, Betty. Betty, a lively woman Martha had always enjoyed but rarely made time for. Betty? It's Martha, she began, a hint of excitement she hadn't felt in months bubbling up. Listen, how would you feel about taking a trip to Italy with me? There was a beat of astonished silence on the other end, then an explosion of delighted laughter. Italy? Martha, are you serious? When? Betty, bless her heart, didn't question the suddenness, didn't ask about Daniel or Sarah. She simply embraced the spontaneous joy. Very serious, Martha replied, a genuine, unburdened laugh escaping her lips. And soon, as she hung up, a profound sense of joy, light and effervescent, bubbled up within her. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in months, perhaps even years. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, Martha felt truly alive. If you're finding Martha's story as empowering as I am, don't miss a single part of her journey to reclaim her life. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to stay tuned for what happens next. Martha retorts, I can afford it easily, now that I'm not funding other people's dreams. The rustle of her discharge papers in hand felt like the unfurling of a new banner. Her health, the doctors confirmed, had improved dramatically. The dangerously high blood pressure had stabilized, the headaches subsided. As she prepared to leave, the hospital's social worker, Carol, a kind woman with shrewd eyes, offered a knowing smile. Miss Peterson, Carol said, her voice warm, I've seen a lot of people come through here. There's a quiet strength in you, a new light. Trust that. Trust your instincts. Martha nodded, the social worker's words affirming the nascent resolve blooming within her. She took a taxi home, the familiar streets flashing by. But this time, her gaze was different. Her charming, but somewhat neglected, cottage, with its overgrown rose bushes and slightly peeling paint, looked back at her with new eyes. It wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary she had allowed to become a waiting room for other people's approval. A place where she had sat, perpetually on standby. The first thing Martha did upon entering was unplug the old landline. The cordless phone, a relic of a bygone era, had been a tether, a silent accusation of neglect when it didn't ring. No more. She wasn't going to sit around hoping for calls that would never come, or only come with demands. Her home would no longer be a place of anxious anticipation. Next, she pulled out a stack of dusty travel brochures she'd collected over the years, never daring to truly entertain the thought of using them. Italy, the Amalfi Coast, Rome's ancient grandeur, Florence's artistic heart. Her dream. With a determined flourish, she spread them across her dining table, a vibrant tapestry of possibility. The planning for her 2-week trip to Italy with Betty began immediately, fueled by an excitement that was almost physical. Betty, true to her nature, dove in with gusto, her enthusiasm infectious. As evening approached, a familiar knot of anxiety tried to tighten in Martha's stomach. The old habits of worry, of expecting the worst, were hard to shake. But this time, she fought it. She walked into her kitchen, pulled out a bottle of Chianti she'd been saving for a special occasion, and poured herself a generous glass. The special occasion, she realized, was simply living. She carried the glass out to her small, wild garden, sitting on her favorite bench as the twilight deepened, feeling a profound sense of peace and control she hadn't known in years. This was her life, and she was finally, truly, in charge of it. Daniel and Sarah would return to find her role in their lives permanently eliminated, though they wouldn't know it yet. The call came on Tuesday morning, precisely a week after her hospital stay. Martha was happily weeding her rose bushes, humming a forgotten tune, when her mobile phone rang. It was Daniel, his voice cheerful, utterly oblivious. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to let you know we're back. Had a fantastic time in Barbados. Sarah's got the best tan." He chattered on, recounting anecdotes of their luxurious vacation. Not once asking about her, not once noticing her silence. Martha let him finish, her heart a cool, calm pool. Then, she interjected, her voice steady. "Daniel, I'm glad you had a good trip. As for me, I was in the hospital for 2 days last week." There was a sudden, jarring silence on Daniel's end, followed by a rush of performative concern. "What? The hospital? Mom, why didn't you call me? Why didn't anyone tell me?" Martha allowed herself a small, mirthless smile. "I did call, Daniel. Multiple times, in fact. I called you twice, and then I called Sarah. I was in severe pain, thought I was dying, and needed an ambulance." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Sarah informed me that you were on a family vacation and that I shouldn't call again unless someone was literally dying." Daniel fumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "Oh, Mom, come on. Sarah probably meant, we had really spotty cell service, and we were trying to relax." "Spotty cell service," Martha repeated, her voice even. "Funny. I never had trouble reaching you when you needed a check for Lily's tuition or a down payment for the SUV. And as for stress, I can assure you my stress levels were rather high that night." She pressed on, her resolve hardening. "Let me ask you, Daniel, honestly, if you had truly known the extent of my distress, would you have cut your vacation short? Would you have left Barbados to come to my side?" The silence was deafening, stretching taut across the phone lines. Daniel's conviction was weak, his excuse-making evident even through the phone. "Well, Mom, of course, it's complicated." "It's not complicated, Daniel," Martha stated, her voice unwavering. He quickly changed the subject, clearly wanting to move past the uncomfortable truth. "Anyway, listen, we're having a family barbecue this Saturday. Sarah's parents are coming, and the kids really want to see you. Lily and Noah were just asking about you." He said the children's names as if they were a magic spell. A guaranteed way to manipulate her. Martha saw through it instantly. The family barbecue? The unspoken expectations? Daniel needed her. Not her presence, not her company, but her labor. She pictured the scene. Her famous potato salad, her brownies, the beer she always brought, the endless cleanup. She was needed as a caterer, a secondary entertainer for the children, a convenient addition to fill out the guest list. "No, Daniel," Martha said, her voice firm, resolute. "No, I won't be coming to your barbecue." Daniel was genuinely confused. "What? Why not, Mom? The kids really want to see you." "I was. I'm sure they do," Martha replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "But I'm no longer your party planner, Daniel. I'm no longer your catering service. And I'm certainly not your emotional crutch." She took a deep breath, the words she had longed to say finally pouring out. "I am done, Daniel. Done contributing my money, my time, my childcare, and my emotional labor to a relationship that has become entirely transactional. When was the last time you called me just to talk, just to see how I was doing, without needing something from me?" He had no answer. Martha continued, the quiet strength in her voice rising. "I have plans, Daniel. Big plans. I'm actually going to Italy with Betty for 2 weeks, starting next month." "Italy?" Daniel exclaimed, his tone shifting from confusion to immediate concern, not for her well-being, but for her finances. "Mom, that's expensive. Can you even afford that?" Martha allowed herself a triumphant, almost imperceptible smile. "Oh, I can afford it easily now, Daniel," she retorted, the words sharp and clean. Now that I'm not funding other people's dreams, they leave angry, but Martha is not afraid. She is finally free. Martha's voice, though calm, cut through Daniel's flustered attempts at reconciliation. Let me be clearer, Daniel. I am done. Done paying for your mortgage, your cars, your children's activities, your vacations. We never asked you to, Mom, Daniel protested, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. No, you didn't ask, Daniel, Martha countered, her tone unwavering. You simply took, and I gave, because I thought it was love. But it wasn't. It was a transaction. And I'm no longer participating. She pressed on, a sharp sting in her words. You called me for a potato salad for your barbecue, less than a week after I spent 2 days alone in a hospital bed, wondering if I was dying. Tell me, Daniel, does that sound like love? Daniel's anger flared, his carefully constructed composure finally cracking. That's unfair, Mom. You're being completely unfair. We had no idea. You had no idea because you didn't bother to find out, Martha stated simply. You care about what I can do for you, Daniel. Not about me. Not about your own mother. A pause, then Daniel's voice, edged with a manipulative whine. So? You're just punishing us? You're abandoning Lily and Noah? I love Lily and Noah more than anything, Martha said, a flicker of pain in her voice, but quickly regaining control. And that will never change. But I will not be their babysitter anymore. Nor will I be funding their expenses. If you want me to have a relationship with my grandchildren, you will facilitate it, without expecting services in return. You're crazy, Mom, Daniel spluttered, the insult, childish and impotent, against her new resolve. No, Daniel, I'm not crazy, Martha said, her voice like steel. I am a grandmother. And a grandmother deserves respect, not exploitation. My role is to love and cherish them, not to be a free resource for you and Sarah. Expected. Suddenly, Martha heard Sarah's angry, muffled voice in the background, a sharp, indignant protest. Daniel paused. Sarah wants to talk to you, Mom. I'll put her on. No, Martha stated firmly. I'm done talking for today. I've said what I needed to say. I am choosing to love myself and setting boundaries you clearly don't understand. With a deep breath, Martha ended the call. Then, with a decisive click, she turned off her phone entirely, the familiar hum of the device dying in her hand. A wave of terror washed over her, quickly followed by an exhilarating rush of freedom. She was afraid, yes, but more than that, she felt alive, electric. Barely an hour later, the doorbell chimed, a rapid, insistent rhythm. Martha knew immediately who it was. She peered through the peephole, confirming her suspicion. Daniel and Sarah stood on her porch, their faces contorted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Martha opened the door, but only partially, keeping her body a barrier, refusing to invite them into her sanctuary. Can I help you? She asked, her voice calm, almost detached. Mom, we need to talk, Daniel demanded, his voice loud and frustrated. What was that all about on the phone? I think I made myself perfectly clear, Daniel, Martha replied, her gaze steady. I said everything I needed to say. Eh? Sarah, ever the manipulator, stepped forward, her face etched with a sickeningly sweet concern, a mask that was now too transparent. Martha, darling, there seems to be a terrible misunderstanding. We're family. Family works things out. Martha's eyes narrowed. Are we family, Sarah? Because family members generally show concern when someone is hospitalized. Family members generally check their messages when their loved ones call in distress. Family members don't dismiss a frantic plea for help because they're on vacation. Sarah's mask slipped, revealing the raw anger beneath. Oh, please, Martha. Don't be so dramatic. We were on vacation. What were we supposed to do? Check our phones every 5 minutes? We needed a break. You explicitly told me not to call unless someone was literally dying, Martha reminded her, her voice a quiet whip. So, tell me, Sarah, how exactly was I supposed to reach you? Daniel, ever keen to minimize, interjected. It was just a headache, Mom. You tend to exaggerate things. Martha stared at him, disbelief washing over her. A headache, Daniel? I was in the hospital for 2 days. My blood pressure was dangerously high. I collapsed in my home. I thought I was dying. Sarah, with a dismissive flick of her hand, looked bored. So, what's the big deal? You're fine now, aren't you? In that moment, Martha truly understood. They didn't get it. They couldn't comprehend the depth of her abandonment, the terror she had felt, the profound sense of being utterly alone. Her pain, her fear, her very existence meant so little to them. The big deal, Sarah, Martha said, her voice gaining a quiet power, is that I finally see clearly. I see that I've spent 8 years trying to buy my way into a family that never truly wanted me. I thought my generosity, my time, my love, would earn me a place, a valued role, but it only made me a convenience. Daniel weakly protested. Mom, that's not true, isn't it? Martha cut him off, her eyes fixed on his. Honestly, Daniel, if I stopped providing all those services, all that money, all that childcare, would you still want me around? Would you still call? His hesitation, the uncomfortable shift of his weight, spoke volumes. He couldn't answer. Relationships are about give and take, Daniel. Martha continued, her voice unwavering. And for 8 years, I've given, and you've taken. I am done giving, Sarah snapped, her composure completely gone. You're selfish, Martha. The children need their grandmother. How could you do this to them? The children need a grandmother who is valued for who she is, Sarah, not for what she provides, Martha declared, her gaze piercing. They need to see healthy relationships modeled, not transactional ones. They need to see a grandmother who loves herself enough to set boundaries. You're exploiting us, Daniel accused, his face red with indignation. Martha let out a short, bitter laugh. Exploiting you? Daniel, I offered everything I had out of desperation for your love and acceptance. That's not exploitation. That's a broken heart trying to mend itself with the wrong adhesive. She shook her head. But I don't need to earn your love anymore. I'm going to Italy. I'm taking art classes. I'm living for myself. Sarah, completely unmasked now, snarled. You're abandoning your responsibilities. My only responsibility, Martha said, pushing the door a little further, signaling the end of the conversation, is to myself. You two are adults. You can handle your own responsibilities. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to plan. She watched as they turned, their faces a mixture of fury and shock, stomping off her porch. They were angry, yes, but Martha was not afraid. She was finally, profoundly, free. Attorney Clark admits it will likely make them angrier but creates a paper trail for restraining orders. The silence that followed Daniel and Sarah's angry departure from her doorstep was short-lived. The harassment began the very next day. Her mobile phone, which she had reactivated, vibrated incessantly with calls from Daniel, alternating between furious accusations and pleading, tearful apologies. When Martha stopped answering, Sarah's name flashed across the screen, followed by increasingly desperate and manipulative voicemails. Martha saw them, her stomach churning, but deleted each message without listening. She knew the tactic. The children would be weaponized, their innocent voices used to tug at her heartstrings. She wouldn't fall for it. By Thursday, the situation escalated. Her neighbor, Betty, a whirlwind of nervous energy, came rushing over. Martha, honey, you won't believe it. Sarah's SUV was parked down the street for ages. I saw her taking pictures of your house. What on earth is going on? Martha felt a chill run down her spine. Pictures of my house? Yes. And, Betty continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, I saw her yesterday at the grocery store. She was following you, Martha. I noticed her trying to hide behind the cereal aisle. The revelation was deeply unsettling. It wasn't just anger anymore. It felt invasive, menacing. Betty, Martha said, her voice tight. You have that security camera, don't you? The one that points towards the street? Betty nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity. Good, Martha said. A plan beginning to form. I might need a favor from you very soon. That evening, just as the last slivers of daylight were fading, another knock came at her door. This time, it wasn't just Daniel. He stood there with Lily and Noah, their small faces confused and scared in the dimming light. Martha's heart twisted with a familiar ache, broken to see her precious grandchildren used as pawns in this cruel game. She knelt down to their level, forcing a gentle smile despite the fury bubbling inside her. Lily, Noah, sweethearts, what are you doing here so late? Lily, her lower lip trembling, looked up at her, tears welling in her big, innocent eyes. Daddy says you don't want to see us anymore, Grandma Martha. Did we do something bad? The words were a dagger to Martha's heart. She rose slowly, her eyes burning with outrage as she fixed her gaze on Daniel. How dare you, Daniel? How dare you manipulate these innocent children with such a cruel lie? Daniel puffed out his chest, trying to appear righteous. I told them the truth, Mom, that you're too busy for family, too busy for us, that you're selfish and don't want to see them. Martha's hands clenched into fists at her sides. That is a despicable lie, Daniel. I love these children more than life itself, and you know it. She turned back to Lily and Noah, her voice softening, though her eyes still held their fire. No, sweethearts, you haven't done anything bad. Grandma Martha loves you very, very much. These are grown-up problems, and Daddy is choosing to make them your problems right now, which is not fair. Noah, usually so boisterous, looked pale and small. Are you mad at us, Grandma Martha? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Martha's eyes welled with tears, and she pulled them both into a tight embrace. Never, my precious boys. Never could I be mad at you. This isn't about you. Not even a little bit. This is about Daddy and Mommy not respecting Grandma Martha. She pulled back, looked at Daniel, her voice hard. Get them out of here, Daniel. And stop using your children as weapons. This is disgusting. Daniel, ignoring her command, insisted. They miss you, Mom. They don't understand why you're doing this. It's stand. Then you explain it to them, Daniel, Martha retorted, her voice firm. You explain that relationships require respect, and that their grandmother won't be taken advantage of anymore. You explain that sometimes, adults have to set boundaries to protect themselves. You're abandoning them, he hissed. I'm setting boundaries, Daniel. Martha corrected him, her voice unwavering. And you are crossing them. Now leave. Have to. As Daniel, red-faced and defeated, led the confused and tearful children away, Martha closed the door, her hands shaking, but the tears were not for herself, or even for the children's temporary distress. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fury. She immediately picked up her phone and dialed her attorney, Attorney Clark, the specialist in family harassment and elder abuse she had contacted from the hospital. Friday morning, Betty appeared at Martha's door again, her face aghast, holding up her phone. Martha, you have to see this. Sarah posted it on Facebook. On the screen was a lengthy post from Sarah's account, already shared dozens of times. It painted Martha as a selfish, unhinged woman in the midst of a midlife crisis who had inexplicably cut off her family and, most cruelly, her own grandchildren. Below the text were carefully selected photos. Lily and Noah, looking forlorn, their little faces shadowed with manufactured sadness. The comments section was a brutal torrent of judgment, calling Martha heartless, selfish, and cruel. Martha felt a tremor of rage course through her, making her hands shake. Sarah was trying to publicly shame her, to turn her community against her. This wasn't just about money or childcare anymore. This was about character assassination. Later that day, Martha went to her art class, a sanctuary she had rediscovered in the midst of her turmoil. As she lost herself in the vibrant swirl of watercolors and the delicate dance of charcoal on paper, she found a solace, a freedom from judgment, that was utterly refreshing. Her instructor, Helen, a woman her age with kind, artistic eyes, encouraged her. Martha, it's never too late to reclaim the things that bring you joy. Never. Helen's words echoed the quiet revolution happening within Martha. After class, Martha went directly to Attorney Clark's office. He listened patiently as Martha recounted the escalating harassment, the social media attack, and the incident with the children. "This is unfortunately common, Miss Peterson," Attorney Clark said, his expression grim. "When financial leverage is removed, abusers often resort to emotional manipulation, character assassination, and even stalking. Some of these behaviors, like harassment and online defamation, are potentially illegal." He recommended immediate steps. First, we need to get a proper home security system installed. Second, you need to meticulously document every single incident, calls, voicemails, visits, and especially that Facebook post and its comments, screenshots, times, dates. Betty's camera footage will be invaluable for the stalking aspect. He then pulled out a draft document. "I've prepared a cease and desist letter. It will formally warn Daniel and Sarah to stop all forms of harassment, including direct contact, third-party contact, and online defamation. It warns of legal action, including potential restraining orders, if they persist." "Will that work?" Martha asked, her voice tight. Attorney Clark gave her a somber look. "Honestly, Miss Peterson, it will likely make them angrier in the short term, but it creates a legal paper trail. It's the essential first step towards protecting you if we need to pursue a restraining order." Martha took a deep breath. She was ready. Martha acknowledges she defended them to avoid facing her own self-loss. The weekend that followed the raw confrontation and the public shaming on Facebook was deceptively quiet. Martha spent her time purposefully, installing the new security cameras Attorney Clark had recommended, a tangible assertion of her new boundaries. With Betty, she pored over travel guides, her excitement for Italy a potent antidote to the lingering sting of betrayal. She felt a growing sense of empowerment, a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. On Sunday evening, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Is this Martha Peterson?" an elderly woman's voice asked, gentle but firm. "My name is Sylvia. I saw the posts online about you, and I had to call. I went through something very similar 5 years ago. With my own children." Martha, torn between suspicion and a desperate need for understanding, listened as Sylvia shared her story. It was eerily familiar. Adult children who had taken everything: money, time, emotional energy. And then, when she finally put her foot down, they had turned on her, publicly destroying her reputation, just as Sarah was doing to Martha. As Sylvia spoke, a profound sense of relief washed over Martha. She wasn't alone. This wasn't just her family. It was a devastating pattern. Sylvia's words were a balm to her wounded spirit. "Family isn't about blood, Martha," Sylvia advised, her voice raspy with years of hard-won wisdom. "It's about who shows up for you, who truly cares, without expectation." Sylvia admitted the hardest part had been the grandchildren. She no longer saw them. "But I realized, Martha," Sylvia confessed, a hint of sorrow in her voice. "I couldn't teach them that love meant accepting mistreatment. I couldn't teach them that it was okay to be used. What kind of legacy would that be?" Martha absorbed Sylvia's words, a cold clarity settling over her. What had she been teaching Lily and Noah? That their grandmother was a doormat? That love could be bought? The thought hardened her resolve. Monday morning, Attorney Clark confirmed that the cease and desist letter had been delivered to Daniel and Sarah. "Expect an escalation before they back down, Miss Peterson," he warned. "This is often how it goes. They'll test your boundaries, try to provoke you." Attorney Clark was right. By Wednesday, Martha's new security cameras caught Daniel peeking in her windows, his face contorted with anger. He drove by, slowly, repeatedly. Later, a strange Facebook account, clearly a fake, began sending Martha harassing messages, crude insults, and threats. Then, one morning, she found a bag of garbage on her porch, overflowing with rotten food, and a handwritten note attached. "This is what you are." It was undoubtedly Daniel's doing. Each incident, instead of breaking her, fortified Martha. She meticulously documented everything: timestamps from the camera, screenshots of messages, photos of the garbage. She wasn't fighting just for herself anymore. She was fighting for her dignity, her peace, her right to respect. They couldn't break her. Not now. 6 months later, Martha found herself laughing, a real, unrestrained belly laugh, on a sun-drenched terrace in Tuscany. Beside her, Betty, equally gleeful, raised a glass of rich, red wine. The rolling hills, the ancient cypress trees, the fragrant air. It was everything Martha had dreamed of, and more. The harassment had indeed continued for a brutal 3 months after the cease and desist letter. Daniel and Sarah tried everything. They showed up at her house with Lily and Noah, hoping to evoke sympathy. They sent flying monkeys, distant relatives and mutual acquaintances to lecture Martha about her duty to her family. They even reported her to Adult Protective Services, claiming elder abuse against herself, painting her as unstable and neglecting herself. But each attempt backfired. The social worker from Adult Protective Services had found a vibrant, healthy, and perfectly lucid woman who meticulously documented her family's aggressive behavior. The social worker, recognizing the true nature of the situation, ended up recommending resources for protection from her family, rather than for her. It was Sylvia who became a true lifeline, introducing Martha to a support group of women with similar experiences. There, Martha met Ruth, Carolyn, and even Helen, her art teacher, who revealed her own painful story of family exploitation. In the safety of that circle, these women shared their stories of financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and the profound grief of being discarded by those they loved most. They all realized, with a shared, heartbreaking clarity, that they had been subtly trained to confuse enabling with love and relentless sacrifice with unwavering devotion. Ruth, a wise woman with kind eyes, articulated a truth that resonated deeply with Martha. "I spent so much time," Ruth had said, her voice heavy with regret, "trying to be the mother they wanted, that I forgot to be the woman I needed to be." Martha felt that truth echo in her soul. She had been so consumed with being Daniel and Sarah's perfect resource that she had erased herself. Eventually, the social media campaign against Martha slowly died down. Without Martha's reaction to fuel the fire, and with the persistent, often confused, questions from community members about the children's increasingly odd behavior in the photos, people began to question Sarah's narrative. Old friends, like Linda, cautiously reached out. "Martha," Linda admitted during a tearful phone call, "I always suspected Daniel and Sarah were taking advantage, but you always defended them so fiercely." Too. Martha, no longer needing to hide from the truth, simply replied, "I know, Linda. I defended them because it was easier than facing the truth of how much I had lost myself." At 66, she finally learned to love herself enough to demand others do the same, and it made all the difference. The real breakthrough, the one that truly softened the edges of Martha's steel resolve, came not from Daniel or Sarah, but from Lily. It was a few months after the most intense period of harassment had subsided, when Lily, now 8 years old, found an old, forgotten phone in a drawer and, perhaps driven by child's intuition, called Martha directly. "Grandma Martha?" Lily's small voice was barely a whisper, thick with tears. "Why don't you see us anymore? Did I do something bad?" Martha's heart shattered. She fought back her own tears, her voice a gentle, steady balm. "No, sweet pea, you didn't do anything bad. This is just grown-up stuff. Big grown-up problems that your mommy and daddy and I are trying to sort out." "Are you mad at mommy and daddy?" Lily asked, a tentative hope in her tone. "No, Lily, I'm not mad," Martha explained, choosing her words carefully. "But sometimes, grown-ups need to have space to figure things out, to learn how to be fair to each other. Mommy says you don't love us anymore," Lily blurted out, the cruel lie cutting deep. "Oh, Lily," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion, "I love you and Noah more than you can possibly understand, more than all the stars in the sky. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them treat you badly. Sometimes, to truly love, you have to stand up for yourself." She paused, hoping the words would sink in, not just for Lily, but for the future woman she would become. "I hope that one day, you'll remember that Grandma Martha chose to love herself too." The conversation ended with a promise of future contact, supervised and on Martha's terms, but it planted a seed. For Lily and Noah, Martha realized she would ensure a different kind of legacy. She decided to establish a trust fund for their college education, one that would become available to them at 18. She explained her decision to Attorney Clark. "I want them to have options," she told him, her voice firm. "I want them to know their grandmother valued their future, even if I couldn't be a constant part of their childhood as I once was." It was a quiet act of love, devoid of expectation. 6 months later, Martha lived a life she had never imagined possible. The terror of the initial confrontation had faded, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Her art classes had blossomed, leading to a small, local gallery showing where, to her astonishment, she sold 3 of her watercolors. The vibrant landscapes, once only dreams, were now tangible expressions of her newfound joy. Betty had become a true, unwavering friend. They took spontaneous day trips to antique shops and vineyards, tried new restaurants, and attended engaging lectures at the local university. Martha had even joined a hiking group, reveling in the physical challenge and the camaraderie of women who shared her zest for life. Her health, once precarious, had improved dramatically. The headaches were gone, her blood pressure consistently normal, her sleep deep and restorative. Her doctor, amazed by the transformation, simply attributed it to the removal of chronic stress. Martha looked younger, her eyes brighter, her smile genuine. She had redecorated her house, not for anticipated guests or family judgment, but for herself. The old guest room, once perpetually ready for Daniel and Sarah's occasional visits, was now her sunlit art studio, filled with canvases, paints, and the scent of linseed oil. And then there was Arthur. At 66, Martha had never expected to date again, but at a senior hiking event, she met Arthur, a kind-eyed widower who, through his own journey, had also learned to prioritize self-respect over people-pleasing. He understood her story, offering empathy without judgment. Arthur often remarked, with a gentle smile, that focusing solely on fixing difficult adult children could blind one to the vast universe of other possible connections and joys. On their last day in Italy, in a quaint Tuscan kitchen, Martha and Betty took a cooking class with a vivacious local chef named Chiara. As Chiara taught them to knead pasta dough and slow-simmer rich sauces, she imparted a philosophy. "You must cook with amore, my darlings," Chiara declared, flour dusting her rosy cheeks. "But first, with amore for yourself." The words resonated deeply with Martha. Later, as they shared a final gelato, Betty turned to Martha. "Do you regret it, Martha? Walking away from your family?" Martha considered the question, looking out at the ancient city bathed in golden light. "I regret the necessity of it, Betty. I regret that Daniel and Sarah view love as a transaction. I regret that Lily and Noah had to witness their parents treating someone so badly, especially me." She paused, a shadow passing over her features, then replaced by resolve. "But do I regret choosing myself? Do I regret discovering my own self-worth, my own joy? Never. Not for a single second." She looked at Betty, her eyes clear. "If I ever see them again, Betty, it will be as equals, or not at all. I am done begging for crumbs of affection." 3 weeks after Martha's return from Italy, the phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was hesitant, lacking the demanding edge it once held. "Mom?" he started. Can we talk?" He admitted that he and Sarah hadn't handled things well, that they missed her, and that the kids missed her terribly. Martha listened, a calm certainty in her heart. She agreed to a conversation, but not without laying down her new reality. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady and firm, "I am not the same person I was. I have non-negotiable boundaries now. This isn't about apologies and me returning to availability. This is about building a completely different kind of relationship, if that's even possible." What would that look like, Mom?" he asked, a genuine note of confusion in his voice. Martha defined it clearly. "It would look like mutual respect. It would look like you valuing my time and my feelings. It would look like me being included in decisions, not just assigned tasks." It would look like you, seeking my company, not just my services. There was a long silence on Daniel's end. I think I'm starting to understand, Mom. Martha hoped he was. I hope so, Daniel, she replied. Because I love myself now, enough to demand others do the same. They agreed to lunch, a tentative first step. And for the first time in her life, Martha was not terrified by the uncertainty. She had built a life she loved, filled with genuine connections, self-discovery, and quiet joy. She looked around her art studio, at the canvases, the vibrant colors, the light streaming in. It was all evidence of a life finally lived for her own joy. At 66, Martha had finally learned to love herself enough to demand others do the same. And it had made all the difference.